Welcome. Hi there. Yeah, this is number 2. Officially, unofficially. Podcast, not a podcast. I still haven't quite figured out the name for it. I suppose it is a mixture of, I think I mentioned this before, right? An audio log. It's not really a vlog because there's no video. I had another idea to try to do something a bit different with this podcast, but I don't want to spoil it. I might revisit the idea. At this time, it's not quite feasible. It will take quite a lot of time as I try to go through the last podcast. It's not too bad recording it, but I do learn a few things in terms of the process, the workflow, and for example, I recorded it and then I had to go through and remove some bits and pieces like the dead spaces. Is that what it's called? Long pauses. Although I kind of like the pause. It gives time for people who might be listening to. It's like a breathing space. I don't like it when podcasts or any sort of talky videos that just talks non-stop or edited in such a way that there is very little time for me to absorb what has been said previously. So I like to have some breathing room. If that's the right phrase, it might be completely the incorrect phrase. Maybe it's my age. I can't quite catch up. I have to sort of think about what was said previously. So anyway, with the workflow process, I had to do some edits, remove some parts of the pauses, and edit things out. I seem to do a lot of lip smacking. I know I do it now, so I gotta be quite conscious on doing that. So it takes time to edit essentially. And then I started using a video editing program so I can put it up on YouTube. There's no video, but I had to just put my own background in there, and then put the audio in there, have a music at the beginning, like a intro and outro type thing. Just have to put the credits for it. Yeah. It takes time to render it, convert it into a video file as well. It was like a 55-minute-ish video. So there you go. This is a second attempt at this whole thing. So what was my original plan for? As I said, I don't want to spoil it. I might try it out next time. Essentially, I just don't have enough space. I mean, I think I do have enough space, but I like to have more space, disk space that is. I did some testing with it as well, and I noticed, yeah, it does. The thing that I want to do does take a possibly considerable amount of space, depending on the quality I'm trying to record it at. Something different, a little bit different, and it's not original. Obviously, I mean, there's nothing original about it. And it will take time as well, since it's it will take up most room, and because it's, I try to aim my podcast for about 50-minute-ish, 55 to 60 minutes plus, maybe. I'm talking a lot about nothing at the moment. That's sort of the idea, I guess. Right. So I've talked about what I did previously, and next thing is, let's see. Next thing I'll talk about has a lot of spoilers. I like to talk a little bit about Disco Elysium. Disco Elysium is a massive game in terms of the ideas within it. There is a lot to talk about, but I'll just pick a very, very small portion of it which grabs my interest. I might talk about other things as well. But before I do, there are certain issues with streaming games which is text heavy or story that is told through a lot of text, a lot of lengthy text. How do you go about doing it? I've seen like some people try to do it, like specifically, well, one example, right? I watch a portion of what the person has done, the streamer, and they sort of quickly mumble through the text itself. I've done a little bit of that, but I try not to. They'd play through the whole thing. Even if the person doesn't play through the whole thing, they're getting involved into it. It's a matter of preference, right? For me, I have mumbled through the text before. Although for me, I try not to do that. If I'm tired, I won't talk about, like, I won't read it out, which you could see in my stream for stuff that's like that. I try to either speed read through certain things. It depends on the game. For something like Disco Elysium, I try to read it a few times. I mean, not out loud if I'm too tired. It's just I would rather not be reading it quickly out loud and skipping through, like mumbling through certain things. It just doesn't work for me. If it doesn't, I'm not sure if that really helps, like for me as a gamer, to absorb the story. So I would read it silently. But I do try to read out certain bits out loud as well. Depends. It really depends on what it is. I think maybe like major plot point parts or critical points of the story. Even if I don't, even if I don't read it out loud, I just speed read within my mind, and then I try to summarize it if I can. I would like to be able to summarize what I've read, or at the very least question what I've read. Like, let's say it was about a certain subject, the character's talking about it, and then I would speed read through all that, say, oh, wonder what that's about. Why did the character do that? So it's trying to reflect or be somewhat critical. Not critical as in deconstructing it. Well, it is deconstruct. I want to deconstruct, so in order to understand. That's what I mean by deconstruct. Rather, I don't want to use the word critical because that could mean something else. So to question, maybe because I'm not interpreting what has been laid out in front of me correct, like I might not have interpreted correctly. So that could be that is an issue on my part. But I feel it's a good idea to try and question things when it's presented, because it helps me think. Like, I'll say, oh, why did that person say that? Didn't we just talk about that before? Oh, wait. It was about not a very good example, but that's a general idea at what I'm trying to express. So yeah, there is, for me anyway, I get exhausted very easily, especially if it's something that big, like Disco Elysium being quite a text-heavy game. Reading it out loud for every single thing is not an easy task. For those that are able to do it, it's amazing. Well, that's pretty much it in terms of that part. Oh, I don't know how, like, I've seen other people play similar games. Not Disco Elysium, but role-playing text-heavy games, and they try to read out the whole thing, as well as trying to do impressions of voices. And those games are massive. I don't know how they do it, and I've read that, they got tired from it as well. They got it. It's quite intensive, especially in one lengthy seating, one lengthy stream. We're talking about streams here. I think they do take breaks from time to time. I've only caught bits and pieces, but I don't know how they're able to do it. That's something. That's not something I can attempt. I can't keep track of the impressions. I can't do impressions anyway. I can't do the voices. Try to differentiate them in some minor way, but otherwise it just ends up like I'm reading a textbook rather than have some sort of life in those voices of the character, the dialogue, and the story. Otherwise, I won't be able to get through. That's just me, though. What else? So yeah, I react to the text with my own questions, queries, my interpretations of what's going on. Right, so Disco Elysium has a lot of themes and ideas, subjects, heavy subjects, self-reflection, the psychological stuff, sociological, metaphysical, questions of reality, collisions between the metaphysical and reality. And one of the things that caught my attention is this the discussion with Joyce from Wild Pines Corporation, I believe, and we were talking about the Pale, I believe. It's something to do with how reality, this world's reality. So if I remember correctly, they sent like rockets and they try to take photos or recordings. I could be completely wrong about this. Don't fully remember everything. But it is quite interesting that they couldn't quite see beyond a certain point, I think called the Pale, where I think there's like a collision between their reality and the Pale, and trying to go through it is not possible. Like it sounds as if everything collapsed to a point where it's just numbers. That's my understanding. I've got the partial text from the game itself in front of me. I'll try to read it out. So Joyce was trying to explain, this is part of it. She says, no detective was safe. She points to the sea. It begins there 6,000 kilometers to the north and even more to the south, east, and west. You are in the middle of the insula, so and so, 6,000 kilometers from the end of the world. Yes, that is enough. Many cities are built much closer. An uproar of matter, darling, rising into the Pale, rolling, evaporating even, a great vision. The area of transition between the world and the Pale is called porch collapse. Imagine grey coronal mist, cold vapor marked by spores of an opportunistic microorganism, a mold that's adapted to grow at the edge of unrest. And then she goes, it's the most disco thing you will ever see. So, and then I ask, what are the physical qualities? It's difficult to describe or even measure something whose fundamental property is the suspension of properties, physical, epistemological, linguistic. The further into the Pale you travel, the steeper degree of suspension, right down to mathematical. Numbers stop working. No one has yet passed the number barrier. It may be impossible. So that's interesting. It sounds like trying to go through this Pale causes reality, matter, the fundamental workings of the reality to break down. It sounds like that's what's happening. Is that, at first I thought it's like a black hole, but it's not, or a singularity where things gets broken down. I could be completely wrong in how that works, but I think I read that a long time ago, where if like light can even escape from the singularity or black hole, but I don't know if that's what's happening in this world. Maybe it is, from the way that she's described it. And I thought that was interesting. I don't really have a lot to add to it. I did briefly see, I was looking through a net and I saw some explanation or theories or speculations about this thing. I didn't read further into it because I didn't want it to change my views until I've talked about it. Now that I've talked about it, it doesn't seem like I have a lot to say. In my mind, I thought I had more. So just reading more on what Joyce is saying, she says, some say the damage stems from extreme sensory deprivation. Oh yeah, because I was asking if it can damage the mind. And she says, some say the damage stems from extreme sensory deprivation. Others that Pale somehow consists of past information that's degrading, that is rarefied past, not rarefied matter. For the main character, the detective, it seems like he has memory missing, but that could be attributed by his drinking problem, right? His alcoholism and drug use. He was drinking a lot, but the reason behind it, I don't quite remember. Like, he had a bad breakup perhaps, but it could be something more. There's certain paths of the story in the game that I did not explore, so I could have missed out a lot. But he might have been interacting with the pill, and it could have damaged his mind. So Joyce was saying, just reading some more of it, they call it the blend over of the self. The pill does not only suspend the laws of physics, but also the laws of psychology, maybe history, even the human mind becomes over-radiated by past. So somehow it bends time, right? It sounds like it bends time because you're saying it changes it sounds like this is my thought, right? When it affects the brain, it scrambles maybe how the neurons are firing, how memories get turned around. But I don't know. It just says that even like history gets suspends the law of physics. I thought it was breaking it down into nothingness or into, I don't know, just breaking it apart. But it seems like it somehow changes time as well. What is it? What does it say? The human mind becomes over-radiated by the past. So time gets bent somehow, and that's how the person would experience it. There are some hints that the detective had that sort of experience through the conversations. Like, I think with the phone call at the earliest stage, it sounded like he was talking to maybe his ex. I don't quite remember. I could be completely wrong again. I should stress that a lot of what I'm saying, well, not a lot, like my experiences with the games I played are from a very casual perspective. I don't research very well. That is a disclaimer. This is just me with my thoughts. What is it? Stream of consciousness, more or less. So we'll go here. What does this over-radiation feel like? It feels terrible, absolutely terrible. International standards strictly limit civilian travelers to 6 days of pill exposure per year. So they've got like a measurement to it as well. It's interesting that Joyce has that level of knowledge on this. I don't know how, like, I'm guessing she's from, she's well paid in her job, quite knowledgeable, but yeah, it's not, I don't quite remember most of her past or her background to the very beginning of the story that you learn about her. What else? Oh, wait a second. Pale driver about the... Anyway, I sort of sidetracked a bit. I read a bit more. So that's that. A very general perception of a general idea or examination. It's not even an examination. It's just a lightly touched observation and thoughts of that small portion of the game. I thought that was interesting. What else is there? Oh yeah, the cryptid stuff. I feel like the cryptid part, especially, this is a spoiler, the review of the cryptid was interesting in that for me, it gave a sense of hope through such a bleak world. Like, there is something more beyond their understanding. And it was at that point where, you learn the truth about the case. It's such a weird way of revealing things, but at the same time, it feels like it it functions. It functions, and I liked it. There's almost this warm feeling in a cold and bitter world. There's something beyond, not just beyond our understanding, on the realm of fantastical, perhaps. I thought that was fascinating. And sometimes I do find myself remembering part of the music, the atmosphere, the rainy, cold moments, and it almost makes me want to go back and revisit some things. There is something haunting about it all, but at the same time, I don't think I can go back to it. Because it is so stark. It's just like that. I'm like, whoa, I don't think I can go back to it again. And it's not like, you finish the game, you can't I don't think you can roam about afterward. It's not like a sudden, everything's open up. You can just walk around, solve the cases you haven't solved. Like the case closed, the game ends. Yeah, I'll have to reload a previous before I closed off the case or even head to the final area. Yeah. Just wanted to say that there's parts of it that almost draws me back again, just thinking of it. I did sort of mention about this in the stream itself. There are times where I feel the money stuff. I didn't like that I had to somehow earn money to progress, like paying the hotel. It doesn't make sense. As a cop, you should have the money. But I theorized that he's drained his bank account. Maybe that's why he couldn't pay for it. And I think the game wants to make you feel really downtrodden, like struggling as a detective, and still need to solve the case, still need to solve problems, help people, or do whatever it needs to move forward. It gives that idea. I think I did sort of briefly talk about this. So the idea of struggling to make money adds to that struggle. I think I've said struggle several times. I mean, now this is my desire for the game. Not that I want them to change it. This is not an expectation. This is my fantasy of an alternate version of that game where there is no stats, or maybe a different mode, like a pure storytelling mode, where you don't have to deal with stats. How would that work, though? It seems like the stats plays an important role. It can open things, open certain dialogues. And it doesn't mean that just because you score high on certain things and open up the tree, the dialogue tree or the event tree, whatever, there's no real specific name for it, that it leads to something positive, which I've discovered. And sometimes failing certain roles opens up other avenues. So an alternate version would be you can pick the paths that you want without being held back by the stats. Or another version is you always roll a high success chance. But again, as I said before, just because you have a high success chance and do succeed in opening the path doesn't mean that it leads you to a positive, to something that is desirable, right? Something else might have happened. And if you have a version where you always succeed at the role, it means that you might miss out on other paths. Yeah, it might not be the thing that you want. So another way around it is maybe to have them all open up, but if you pick the path, you won't be able to pick the others unless you reload and pick the other path again. So in a way, it's more like choose your own adventure rather than being stats based. So I'd like to have a different game that uses that idea, choose your own adventure rather than requiring stats or dice rolls. That's the portion of the game I didn't like. Sorry, I knocked the table there. Yeah, that's just I might talk a bit more about my version of something like that in the future. What else? I'll sort of briefly touch upon this sustaining the drive to play lengthy games, something that for me, anything, I suppose, it depends on the gameplay, the story as well. But something exceeding 40 hours for something like this particular game, it's difficult to say. It's difficult. How do I sustain that drive? I mean, for me personally, again, it depends on my mood, right? Sometimes my mood might be, oh no, I need to get through this. Or sometimes, oh, I gotta know more about this. I gotta know more. It could be my age thing, my attention span. So I don't know. I don't know how how I would approach this and how I would be able to sustain. What I've been doing in the past is play something else in between that I can get into without thinking too much about it. A mindless game, right? Like, I don't know, action style game. Just break it up, give it a bit of variety, and then I can go back to something which is lengthy and heavy and has a heavy subject in it. I should state that how do I sustain the drive for something that is lengthy as well as having heavy themes, subjects, and ideas. So, and that's to break it up with something that is light, that I can just jump in fairly quickly. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So the next thing I want to say is, would I have done things differently if I hadn't been streaming the game? Maybe, like, can I apply that question to any games, not just Disco Elysium or any lengthy, heavy theme games? I think that maybe if I'm not streaming it, like specifically, like let's say we're talking about something like Disco Elysium. If I had sat down and played out of stream in my own time, maybe it might have been different because I would have been focused on reading it quickly and not have to say it out and reinterpret it or question it, maybe. But at the same time, as I said before, questioning it might be a good thing to make me think in a certain way to try to understand what has been presented in front of me. So it's hard to say. I think that there is maybe advantages. I might have been able to play it a bit quicker, might have a different view, perspective, but at the same time, I might have missed out on things, or I might not have. So it could be quite different. In terms of other type of games, say action games, there's not much, like if I were to play those outside stream, yeah, I might be able to. I think I would probably be able to play through them without thinking too much and just fully be zoned out into it and without thinking, what do I have to say? But that's part and parcel. Like, no, like saying things is what it's about in a stream generally. But there are times where I don't really say much at all and just sit there and play it and zone out and interact if people are watching or asking questions. I think I haven't been as active in that regards. There's probably more to say about that. I could say there's probably more to say. Okay, I'm repeating myself again and again. So it comes down to what is the reason behind me streaming and playing a game? I think what is my drive for that? Ultimately, it's trying to share this experience, this gaming experience, with anyone who's curious to watch. I think I sort of talked about it last time as well. If people are interested in watching it through, like me playing it as well, giving my own bits of thoughts here and there, my not rough play style, very casual play style, I should say. If they're interested in it, that's great. They're joining that journey. I think that's as simple as I can put it. If I can think of another way of describing it, I will. I will add to it next time. What else? Okay. We'll talk about Alan Wake and Control, because I just recently finished Alan Wake. This is again a very generalized perspective. I generalize. It's not a review. It's not an analysis. It's just general thought about it. Comparing the two, Alan Wake is linear, and it really suits that game. It tells the story in a linear fashion. My understanding they had an idea for a open world type game, and I don't know how that would work out. It feels like it could have dragged it out more and more forest area to run around, and I just couldn't take it at some point. But that game's fairly old now, so maybe some of the design methodology in terms of gameplay might have been maybe dated. I'm not sure, but having a linear path of how your character goes through the game works for Alan Wake, works for this game, and as well as in terms of storytelling. And they're broken it up into chapters. That works for me. What makes it feel like it's dragging out is the gameplay, like the driving parts. It feels like that's a bit of a padding. Although there was sections where the driving and the headlights really work well to get rid of the enemies. There's one bit where you're stuck in an area and there's a truck that was trying to hit you. Unfortunately, I drove my car in there and I was able to use the truck's headlight to destroy that possessed vehicle. But after a while, the general shooting mechanics with the character running around using a torchlight, initially it was interesting, but I don't know. I'm not sure repetition is the problem. Like, I don't really have problems with repetition. It's more about how it's executed. It might have been better if they've added other combat mechanics into it, but I'm not entirely sure. It feels like the combat mechanics shouldn't be added on. It shouldn't have other things added on to it to take away the tedium. It's not really even the tedium. For me personally, the enemies it just felt annoying to try to fight them. But it's a combination of I wasn't really interested in the combat mechanics about, I don't know, a couple of hours in. Yeah, it just got annoying with the enemies just suddenly popped up right behind you. But the game sort of gives you a chance to react by doing these slow-mo things, right? There were points where you're in the forest and they just appear just about everywhere. There were explodey barrels or tanks that you can shoot and try to hurt them as well. Generally, they seem to work well. Maybe I'm not using my weapons effectively. That's the other problem. The game does give you a good portion of items to use, but you sort of have to ration them accordingly as well, which is fine. I feel, which is fine. The other thing is, Alan Wake, unlike other survival horror games, or even actually, like, say, compared to, I don't know, do I want to compare it to other type of games? Is that like Resident Evil, for example? The latest one, Resident Evil 2 Remake, right? No, let's not do that because I'm going to make a mistake. I'm not going to do that. I'll just say that in Alan Wake, when you're moving from one area to another, or, yeah, like within a chapter, if I remember correctly, your weapon just gets reset. It doesn't carry over to the next area, to the next chapter, right? And the game tells you when you can leave an area, in terms of, like, there were parts where you have to defeat the enemies before you can move forward. I think it was in the early stages, if I'm not mistaken. So you can't really run past them. Like, the fights with the vehicles, I'm gonna say that those are like mini boss fights. They're sort of understandable that they're blocking that's an area that you have to defeat them and go away. There's certain games where the areas are blocked off until you defeat all enemies. In this, it's like, all right, some places are like that, some aren't. So I don't know if they did that just to give it a bit of variety. There are times where I could just run past them. Not all the time, some of the time. But the enemies, yeah, they're varied, which is good. I like the ideas behind them. But yeah, after a while, it just got too frustrating in terms of the mechanics. there were other things as well. Oh yeah, the camera isn't exactly behind Alan. It's sort of over to the right of his shoulder. And I had to turn up the sensitivity of my mouse and the control because of the enemies popping out just about anywhere, and especially the ones that runs around really fast. Those are really annoying. But there is a negative side to increasing the sensitivity, and that is making the game, for me, it causes nausea. It could, as I say, it could be a combination with the not being fully centered, as well as because I had to increase the movement due to the enemies. It makes me really dizzy at points where it gets serious when I'm in indoor areas, but that fortunately doesn't happen too frequently. Yeah, that's, but I have problems with third-person games in confined spaces, or 3D, like just about any 3D games within confined spaces. I don't know if it affects me in first-person shooters, maybe mostly third-person. It could be because you've got you're looking at the stationary character, but everything around you is moving around, if that makes sense. But that's because you're moving around in a room. The camera has to be fixed behind the character. Not always, because sometimes you can like turn around and look around the character, but it has affected me. It has affected me while playing Gears of War 4 and 5 as well, I've noticed. Yeah, it could be a combination of things. And moving around rapidly in a confined space, yeah, that causes me problems. Okay, and yeah, Control. So now in terms of the narrative comparison with Alan Wake, I don't know, I feel like Control, the stories don't flow together as well, but that's because of its semi-open world nature rather than a linear. So if a game area is linear as you're walking through it, I feel the story can be told in a tighter way, as long as the game mechanics isn't stretched out or there's tons of padding in between. So the story can integrate well with the gameplay, I feel. And Alan Wake sort of have that in a way. Control, on the other hand, doesn't quite have that. On top of that, you've got the upgrade components, like a RPG light thing, right? Your abilities can be upgraded. So I think that adds to it. Alan Wake doesn't have any of that. You just pick up the weapons, and if you try to run a lot, he runs out of breath and he gets tired. But I feel with the stripped down, without the abilities to upgrade, for me, I can focus on, all right, I have to get from point A to point B, and these are the stories. If you want to read about these additional things, they're in the manuscript or collectibles or so and so, right? But with Control, I feel the story, I don't know if it's because of how it's told, how it's executed, the way it is written, that it feels like it hasn't really coalesced in my mind. I mean, I get it. Jesse's taking over the bureau, right? It's not overly complicated. I feel like maybe Alan Wake is more complicated. I don't fully get it, but it managed to tell a story which draws me in. That's the thing. Alan Wake sort of told a story that draws me in. He was trying to get his wife back, right? And it's in a weird, twisted world. Control has that weirdness in it, but it doesn't feel like, I don't know, maybe it hasn't drawn me in. Well, I like it. I like the weirdness in it, but the story, I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. I want to be able to describe it, but I am not quite sure how to. But what I'll say is when I get into Control, instead of trying to focus on the story, my attention is trying to gain more powers. Because as soon as you see the tree and that you can do upgrades, that sort of stuff, my first thought is, look, I got to progress the story, but in order to do that, I got to get more powers. So my focus is switched. There's like two sides to it. Like I'm comparing with Alan Wake and Control. Alan Wake, I'm not upgrading anything. I move forward. I go to point, as I say, point A, point B, get to the next story, survive and not get killed. That's it. Control, you got to survive, but to progress, you got to upgrade as much as you can. Otherwise, you can't progress. So there's that there's that stopgap right there, or a gate, so to speak. You have to satisfy those stages. I have to satisfy those stages before moving forward, in addition to increasing my skills of playing the game, right? Not in terms of upgrading, that's part of it, but in terms of how well I know how to aim, use the controls, use the environment, that sort of thing, those basic gameplay mechanics. So I have to build upon my skill sets for that. That's in addition to that. Same thing with Alan Wake. I have to improve my skills on my aiming, using the torchlight, etc., etc. Sorry, hit the mic stand thingy again. Anyway, that's that. What else is there? I think ultimately there are two different ways of being engaged with the game and being involved in the game and story, and where the focuses are. So I thought that was an interesting thing for me to talk about, like what draws me in one and the other. And I like comparing the two, since they're the most recent games that I played, made by the same group of people as well, even though they're ages apart in terms of when one was created. Right, what else? What am I looking for in terms of future games, right? I'm looking forward to Horizon Zero Dawn coming on PC. Don't know what that, I've seen bits and pieces of that game. Seems like something I might be able to get into, hopefully. Hunting giant robot animals and robot dinosaur creatures type things. Looks interesting. It sort of reminds me of Zoids. I don't know if any of you or many of you know of toys where you can make mechanical robotic dinosaurs. I think there was even a CG animated series, I don't know, early 2000. As a kid, I liked the robots. It's really cool. You put the little person in there, they control them. Yeah, it sort of reminded me of that. I know it's nothing like that Horizon Zero Dawn. It just brought back those memories. Of course, another game I'm looking forward to, Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I'll try to talk more about that next time or later on. In terms of what I predict for that game, what might come out from it. In the Avengers game, I'm kind of worried about it, because this Tomb Raider's gameplay mechanics is another one which I'm not talking about the climbing parts or even the puzzle parts. In terms of the action bits where you're fighting, it improved quite a bit on the last one. What was it? Shadow of the Tomb Raider, right? Rise of Tomb Raider was the second one. I mean, in terms of the latest, as of now, franchise series. I don't know. I hope Crystal Dynamics, it is made with Crystal Dynamics, if I'm not mistaken. I better check that. I'm trying not to type too loudly. Yeah, Marvel's Avengers, they did make Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which is the last one. I hope they improve there's something about the movement mechanics which I'm not too fond of in the game. There's something about it. I don't move quite right. But, I played Assassin's Creed, Ubisoft's games before with third person, from Assassin's Creed Syndicate, Origins, Odyssey, what's the other one? Ghost Recon Wildlands, Ghost Recon Breakpoint, Division 1, Division 2, the ones with the third person, Watch Dogs. They all seem to move in ways which it suits me. But when I play something like Tomb Raider, like moving Lara Croft around, it just doesn't feel quite right. It doesn't quite suit me. I don't know. Maybe they'll adjust it more. As I say, they have the movement seem to have worked. They fine-tuned it, and seems like they polished it more in Shadow of the Tomb Raider. I hope they do that as well in the Avengers game. That's my worry in terms of character movement, because that affects how it's played. And I don't know how it's going to work. Like when you're controlling Hulk, is Hulk going to be a bit different than controlling, say, Iron Man and Thor? They're going to be... I'm going to assume that there's going to be some differences, because Hulk being a much bigger character, right? And how is flying going to work with Iron Man? I'm kind of worried. And the only sort of third-person flying game character, not with a plane, is Anthem. I played the beta briefly, and it seemed alright. It doesn't seem too bad. Kind of shamed how it turned out, but I hear that they're gonna redo the thing again somehow. And I did pick Anthem up for super cheap. So who knows? I'll keep an open mind on that one. That's Anthem. But in terms of back to Avengers, yeah, we'll see how the movement mechanics is. That's quite important for me. Oh yeah, of course, Cyberpunk 2077, right? And Watch Dogs, Legion. Those are the games I'm looking forward to. Oh, I almost forgot Death Stranding, July sometime. I'm kind of worried about streaming that game because it's got copyright music and I don't want to get in trouble. Apparently, there's no way of turning off the music, so I might have to like mute the game audio when music comes on, which is very disappointing. Or maybe turn it down somehow, like on the stream. It's gonna be awkward, like when I get to a scene and the music comes up. Press escape, alt tab out. I don't know. Turn the music down at all times. Yeah, there's like no specific volume control for the music itself, right? I think that's what I heard. I could be wrong. I need to look up on that one. I still need to talk about the digital streaming game presentations. I would love to be able to do a live stream and have these presentations on at the same time. But unfortunately, they're on at the time that is when I'm asleep or when I'm working, unfortunately. So I'll probably do something like afterwards. I'll do another podcast talking about them after the presentations and give my thoughts on it. Maybe. We shall see. There's a few coming up. I think the one I look forward the most, obviously, is the Ubisoft one. I think there's a PC gaming one. Let me do a quick check. Yes, let's see. There is a PlayStation one, but I don't have a console. I'm not really I'm not really a console person. But they might announce some games that could come to PC. So there's something there. Oh yeah, there's a PC gaming show on June 14th. Again, I think that's my when I can't watch it. I'll just have to watch whatever gets recorded later on. Oh, there's a Steam Game Festival, June 16th. EA, June 18th, which will be interesting as well. They might have, I think it's either sports game, but we might hear about Anthem 2.0 or maybe remaster of some of the games, maybe. Let's see. I'm just looking through a list on a website. Kotaku has it as well. I think, yeah, Rock Paper Shotgun has a list as well. Oh yes, CD Projekt Red, June 25th, I think. Ubisoft's is July 13th, and there's a Microsoft Xbox July sometime. There we go. Something to look forward to, something to talk about. I might talk about my, yes, I say AC Valhalla predictions next time, as well as Ubisoft presentation predictions. And I think that should be it for now. All right. Thank you for listening. I hope you all have a good day or night. Take care, stay safe, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.